Hi, this is Marisa Benedict, and you're listening to The Other Side of the Bell.
Hello, and welcome to The Other Side of the Bell, a podcast dedicated to everything trumpet, brought to you by Bob Reeves Brass. We'll help you take your trumpet playing to the next level. I'm John Snell, trumpet specialist here at Bob Reeves Brass, and I'll be your host for this episode. My special guest today is Clay Jenkins. We'll get to Clay's interview here in a moment after a word from our sponsor and some trumpet news. Today's episode is brought to you by Bob Reeves Brass, who share your passion for creating extraordinary music. You know that feeling when your instrument just clicks and the music flows effortlessly? That's what Bob Reeves Brass has been helping customers do since 1968. We've helped brass musicians like you achieve their dreams by ensuring their equipment is always in perfect harmony. We know you want to immerse yourself in the art of music making, and we're here to remove any barriers between you and your creative vision. At Bob Reeves Brass, we work closely with you to understand your unique needs and provide tailored solutions like valve alignments, custom-fit mouthpieces from our extensive stock models or a hand-carved custom mouthpiece, gap adjustments with the Reeves sleeve system, or even tweaking your existing gear. No matter your level of experience, we offer free consultations and serve musicians from all walks of life. And if you're looking for the perfect instrument to inspire your next musical masterpiece, we proudly carry the exquisite Van Laar line of trumpets and flugelhorns, as well as the superb Charlie Davis line of trumpets. What's more, Bob Reeves Brass is taking their commitment to your musical journey even further. We're now offering a carefully curated collection of top-notch products designed specifically for brass musicians. You'll find premium guard bags to protect your beloved instruments, a diverse range of mutes from renowned brands like Ulvain mutes, Yupon and Okura mutes from Japan, Trumcore mutes, Rayano, Clary Wood mutes, and Charlie Davis mutes, ensuring you have the perfect mute for every performance. But that's not all. We've also got you covered when it comes to essential maintenance supplies, with a hand-picked selection of valve oils, lubricants, and more to keep your instruments in tip-top shape. Bob Reeves Brass is truly your one-stop shop for everything you need to fuel your passion and create music that touches hearts and souls. So go ahead, let us help you elevate your sound to new heights. Don't wait another moment to elevate your musical journey with Bob Reeves Brass. Connect with us at bobreeves.com, shoot us an email at info@bobreeves.com, and keep up with the latest news on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter at Bob Reeves Brass. Embrace your passion for music and let Bob Reeves Brass be your partner in creating the extraordinary. Well, I'm really looking forward to Clay's interview. For those of you who listened last episode with Emil Martinez, Emil talked so much about how much he owed to Mr. Jenkins for his generosity in taking a young trumpet player under his wings and making sure he led him to the successes that he could achieve. So it's very fitting that the very next episode we have Clay on here to talk about his career, his life, his jazz playing, his teaching at Eastman, and his friendship with Snooky Young. So we'll get to that in a moment. A couple things I do want to mention. Again, a huge thank you to everyone who listened to Emil's interview. It was one of our most popular episodes, and I think you know why. I mean, what a generous, kind, caring person Emil is, and what a player. If you check out his Instagram, he posted some clips just the other day of his education that he does at the Speakeasy in Venice Beach. And man, just plays all over the horn, real tasty solos, and obviously a really creative artist. Thank you to everyone who came by TMEA. I talked about it last episode, and it was our most successful convention to date. A lot of mouthpieces found new homes. A lot of you are avid listeners. I think every other person that came up wanted to say hi, and I absolutely love when listeners come up to me at conventions or the other staff and love to hear your passion and what you get out of these podcasts. So thank you to everyone who came by. We booked up for, I think this is the 7th or 8th TMEA we've done, and we've sold out of alignments every single time. So thank you for that. Guard bags, I think all sold almost on the first day. I think we had one or two left. Mutes, a lot of you were interested in the mutes we had in stock, the Ulvain mutes from Sweden, the Yupon mutes, and some of the others we carry. Of course, Trumcore is always a favorite, as is Clary wood mutes. So we were running around for 3 days. It was an amazing time, but we did have some time to have some great Texas barbecue with some of our colleagues, Pickett Brass, Greg Black, and those folks. Virtuosity, Steve Johnson from Virtuosity Music was there. Oh, the Shires folks, Matt and Alexis from Shires. We had a really fun hang, all enjoying some Texas barbecue. Coming up, just in a matter of a few weeks, we are heading right back to Texas, this time to Fort Worth at the Texas Christian University for the National Trumpet Competition. And this one, there is a vendor room. And the good news with the NTC is it's free and open to the public. At least the vendor rooms are. So if you want to come in and try equipment, you want to meet us and just say hi, or if you want to get a valve alignment, you don't need to pay for an expensive conference pass or anything like that. You can just walk in and do some shopping. Although I highly recommend, you do have to pay, I believe, to get a pass to go hear the competitions and some of the master classes and things. It is definitely worthwhile if you are interested in that, to hear some of the up and coming artists on our instrument at all ages, starting from the youngsters up through college and graduate. And of course, the trumpet ensemble competitions are always fun. Just seeing a group of students all with a difficult piece memorized, and now they're adding in choreography and things while playing at the highest level. So all that being said, if you want to come in, the dates for that, March 14th to 16th is the vendor rooms. We'll be there. All the information is available at bobreeves.com/NTC. N for national, T for trumpet, C for competition. So bobreeves.com/NTC, and we'll have all the information there, including that all-important link to pre-book your valve alignments. We are already over 50% sold out on alignments. There are still plenty of slots left, so don't go too fast. However, if you are interested in getting your valve alignment done, I do expect this to sell out before we even show up to the convention. Again, March 14th to 16th at Texas Christian University. Further on down the line, never too early to plan, we will be at Salt Lake City for the International Trumpet Guild Conference. That's at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City. That's the end of May, early June, right after Memorial Day, traditionally that week. And we're also working on getting to Connecticut, I think it's Bard College, for the International Women's Brass Conference. That'll be the week before ITG. So I think that's actually Memorial Day weekend. I'm not sure how we're going to do the traveling, but we're going to make it work because we try to get out and get in front of as many folks as possible each year in case you can't make it out to Los Angeles and visit our shop. A couple other things I want to mention. Speaking of Shires, we have some great trumpets in stock right now. I just picked up a Doc Severinsen Destino and a custom AZ B-flat trumpet. Holy cow, that AZ is a spectacular instrument. The Destino is great too, don't get me wrong, especially if you want to get that sizzle like Doc does. But the AZ we got in stock, my guess is probably not going to last long if I don't buy it myself. One of the things that's really cool if you get a Shires instrument through us, through Bob Reeves Brass, is we are happy to include a Bob Reeves Brass valve alignment at no extra charge. So you're adding $275 in value for the 3-valve horns, and of course the 4-valve piccolos are a little bit more. So we throw that in for free, and Shires makes great instruments, and adding that alignment in there just gets it to the nth degree of performance capability. We also have some great Q series in stock. They're higher horns, the C's. The E-flat D is one of my favorite E-flat Ds, and for the price, you can't beat it. And the piccolos, really great, especially if you're getting into college or you're a community player and don't want to spend $4,000 or $5,000 on a horn you might pull out of the case every so often. They're really solid horns. The intonation is great. The blow is great on them. And for the price, you can't really get a better value unless you get into the used market, which has its ups and downs, as you are, I'm sure, pretty aware of. All of those are available on our website, bobreeves.com, or the online store is trumpetmouthpiece.com. You can see our inventory on there. And of course, if you have any questions or want to consult with us, give us a call, send us an email, and either myself or one of my staff will be happy to consult with you. That's all the news I have for today. Let's get right to my interview with Clay Jenkins. Clay Jenkins is a renowned jazz trumpeter and educator whose dynamic career spans decades of performance and teaching. He launched his performing journey with the Stan Kenton Orchestra before moving to Los Angeles, where he toured and recorded with the big bands of Buddy Rich and the Count Basie Orchestra. A charter member of the Clayton Hamilton Jazz Orchestra, Clay has amassed over 100 recording credits, released 7 solo albums, and recorded as a co-leader with many other notable names. Since joining the Eastman School of Music faculty in 2000, Clay has continued to perform worldwide while mentoring the next generation of jazz musicians. Inspired by his close friendship with the late trumpet legend Eugene Snooky Young, he established the Snooky Young Endowed Scholarship at Eastman and is currently writing a biography of Young's life. And now, here's my interview with Clay Jenkins. Well, I'm so honored to be joined today by Clay Jenkins. Clay, what's like 14 degrees you were saying there?
Yeah.
In Rochester?
A balmy 14 degrees, yeah.
And here I am in short sleeves out here in L.A. We just had one of your students on the podcast, Emil Martinez, and man, what an episode that was. I want get into that a little bit because he obviously brought up Mr. Jenkins number of times.
He's such a good guy.
Yeah, but I want to start with where you got started. Bring us up to speed. How the trumpet kind of fall into your hands, or how did that come about?
My dad was a trumpet player, and my older brother was a good trumpet player, and it wasn't really a question of what I was going to play, really. He just told me one day we were going to go get my horn, so we went and picked out a horn, and I still have that horn. We picked out an old Bundy cornet, and that was my first horn.
So you started on cornet. What kind of player was your dad? Was he a jazz player, or was it
he
little bit
kind
of
he played a little Dixieland and what we call trad now, and he played some swing. He was a good swing player. He'd play he had a little band, and they'd play the melody, and then he'd play a half a chorus, and then that was it, And then they do medleys, and he had a little dance band, but he loved it to death,
So you were surrounded by music.
Yeah, I really was. Yeah, I really was.
Yeah. So was he your first teacher, or did you get your lessons?
Yeah, he and my brother helped me, and then we had my brother and I both had a teacher that was connected with Texas Tech. His name was Richard Tolley. He was actually a really good teacher.
So you got into private lessons, and who were your early inspirations?
Well, my dad always watched Doc Severinsen, of course, and Al Hurt, and then some of the guys that played with the rock bands like Lou Soloff, with the Blood, Sweat, and Tears. And we did all the Chicago and in Cold Blood and all those bands, and
Cold Blood. We don't hear that one very often.
Yeah, right. San Francisco guys and Tower Power guys. And so that's who we listened to before the jazz guys. My first jazz person was probably Miles and Freddie Hubbard. Yeah.
Okay. Was that because of your dad? Was it he have an album lying around, or how were you introduced to Miles?
I think some friends of mine kind of turned me on to some Miles stuff, which I totally didn't get at first, not at all. But when I got to understand it, a little more familiar with it, I really loved it, So I was pretty hooked.
And that was what, middle school, high school age?
Late high school. I mean,
really? Okay.
Yeah, and also I was into big bands. Like my dad had Kenton records, a lot of Kenton records. So I knew Buddy Childers and Connie Condoli and those people, the guys that were on Kenton's band, I thought Kenton was like the only big band for a while, And I heard the Stan Kenton band out at Disneyland one time, and I thought, oh man, this is pretty great. So,
and not to ruin the rest of the interview, but you got to play with them.
That was a dream come true.
We'll get there, but it's interesting, especially your experience nowadays as a professor. Like we have any album pretty much at our fingertips. And it's fascinating to hear, us that didn't grow up with the internet and Spotify and things like that your inspirations came from what you had access to, right?
That's so true. And I was in Lubbock, Texas, a little kind of a conservative college town, And so you're right. It was really a couple of friends of mine that were kind of hipper than me and turned me on to some other stuff, Yeah, you're so right.
So based on that, did you have any aspirations to become a jazz trumpet player or a big band player, or were you just doing it because you were doing it?
I liked it. I think I told you the other day I was studying to be a vet. I went to North Texas, which is a big jazz school, but I was pre-vet, and I just wasn't very good at that. And I may have mentioned, the professor said, nah, you're having trouble with the zoology, so inorganic chemistry is going to beat you up. So I switched my major. But I was at North Texas anyway, so I think my aspirations were I did want to be a jazz player. I really did. Yeah.
So, did you choose North Texas out of high school because you heard of their music department?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I really did. Yeah. And my dad we went down there, and it was the 25th anniversary of the department. And we heard this concert, and they had all these guests, Clark Terry and Oliver Nelson. I was just knocked me out,
Wow. Got the bug.
Yeah.
So then what was like? So you switch over to a music major?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mid-college and
well, it was like the first year.
Oh, like early on.
Yeah.
Thank God for that professor.
That's so true. Because when he said that, I was like, you're right.
This would be a terrible conversation if we were talking about zoology and veterinarian science. I can't even say veterinarian. Okay, so did you start playing in the big bands there? You start taking trumpet lessons? Who was teaching at the time down there?
I had a couple of grad students, and then John Haney was the trumpet teacher there, who was wonderful.
Institution, yeah.
And then the lead player was Kenton. I'd gone to a Kenton camp the summer before I went to North Texas. And I met the lead trumpet player, Jay Saunders. Mm-hmm. And he was really nice, and then a lot of it was sort of lined up for me, I think, because he happened to be going back to school at North Texas in that fall. And so when I got there, I couldn't read at all. So I barely made the last band. I just couldn't sight read at all. And Jay helped me out, and he became a real mentor of mine. He wasn't a jazz player. He was a lead player, he ended up getting me. Later on, he ended up helping me get on Kenton's band.
Interesting. And then he ended up teaching at North Texas later on.
Yeah, he did. He taught there for 25 years after that. Yeah.
So maybe he already had that teaching bug at a young age when he was playing, taking you under his wing. And
I still, one of my sons is named after Jay. We were very close. We're still close. We talk. Yeah. We talk every few weeks.
Amazing. I need to have him on. Longtime customer of the shops, and I've talked to him a number of times, and I need to reach out. He's on the list, so
he's a sweetheart.
This will light the fire under me to reach out to him. So you were playing in North Texas, you were doing the thing, and then what transpired? You jumped to Kenton's band?
Well, I graduated, and then the jazz player, Tim Higgins, was a jazz player, and he left to go with Woody Herman's band, and Jay had put my name in with Stan. Jay was real close with Stan. And the trumpet section there was Jay Sollenberger. He had left, he was with Chase, the band Chase. And the band had that terrible tragedy where the plane crashed, and he nearly went on the plane. His girlfriend asked him to drive her instead. That's the only reason he wasn't on that plane. Yeah. Chase was flying the plane. I think it was Chase's plane. So he was on the band. It was a really good trumpet section. And then it kind of evolved, after he left and went with Woody as well. Yeah, so I got on actually because of Tim leaving Stan.
So you'd finished up with North Texas, and that was your first big gig?
It was. I was a blessing. It was a blessing.
Were you playing around town or what? Freelancing kind of thing? And then that got the call.
Yeah. In fact, I was working with Jay at the Fairmont Hotel, and he came up and he put his arm around me and he said, "I'm sorry, man, but you're not going to go to grad school." And I was like, "What?" And then he told me Stan wanted me, so it was great.
Yeah. So what was that like? There's not really any touring big bands anymore, and I'd love to get that picture of. You get the phone call, and then do they send you the music? Do you just show up and you just show up and go?
I met the band in Buffalo, New York, in the winter of '78, and I was nervous as could be. And we had one sectional, and then we had a gig the next night. We went all year that year. We didn't take any breaks, no breaks. And that's the year Stan fell. He fell and hit his head. And so we were without him for several months. But, we went from January to October. No breaks.
Wow.
Yeah.
On a bus, right?
On a bus. Unless we had to go more than 400, 500 miles, then we'd fly and the bus would catch up with us. But he owned the bus,
Yeah.
So, it was a serious road.
And what were the chops like? Did you have to get adjusted to that?
Yeah, that was a loud band. That band played loud. Stan's band was like Wagnerian swing, it was loud.
But I mean, you had the training in North Texas, so
Yeah,
I mean
true.
that's got to be one of the best commercial programs at the time to set you up for that. But
Yeah.
then to get into the players that are actually doing it night in and night out.
They were strong too. I mean,
Yeah.
and it was on Stan's band. It was 2 bass trombones, 2 baritone saxophones, and 5 trumpets.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I got off the band, my aperture was about that big because I was playing fifth, like triple forte, Yeah,
A lot of low notes loud all the time. I mean, did you even get a chance to practice outside of the shows, or was it just kind of get in where you can?
I think I practiced some in hotel rooms. I'm a practicer. My dad insisted that I practice, so I really grew up practicing a lot. Mm-hmm. I still practice a lot. I don't know how much I'm improving these days, but I'm keeping up with my students. Maybe
still putting in the time.
I do put in.
You
the
and
time.
Doc Severinsen, I love it.
Yeah. Oh, he was practicing crazy. He was just practice all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're trying to fit in on the road, and the fifth chair was like still the solo chair, right? Or was that split with the second?
There were a couple. The fourth player was a really good jazz player. His name was Bob Dahl, and so he started playing some, and I was playing some. And the third player was a good player too, and the lead player was a good jazz player too. Mm-hmm. So Jay Sonberger was actually a really good soloist. So
yeah,
it was. It had more jazz players than I'd seen when I'd seen the band.
So you guys would split up the work or
trade
things around?
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah.
Did you ever imagine growing up listening to Kenton that young 20-something-year-old would be then on the band touring?
Yeah, I was flying high there for that whole year, And Amazing. Then Stan got hurt and we took off, and we didn't know if we were going to go back, but we actually did go back in 79 for a while. I went out in January and I got off in May.
Another stint with him.
Yeah.
When did it happen after your time with Stan? You settled down somewhere? Or
I moved to Los Angeles. I was a young, expecting dad, and I moved to Los Angeles. We moved to Los Angeles and was kind of plugging away there, just trying to make a living, really. Doing a lot of rehearsal bands and stuff, and met a lot of people. And I took some lessons. I started taking lessons from Jimmy Stamp. That was a great thing.
How did you connect with Jimmy?
That's funny. Somebody told me to call Tom Stevens, who was the principal player in L.A. Phil, And I called him up and I told him who I was, and he goes, "Well, where'd you get my number?" He said, "I don't teach jazz players." And I was like, "Okay, And he goes, he was kind of gruff with me. He goes, "You should call Jimmy Stamp." And I said, "I don't even know who that is." And he was like, "What?" So it's funny. I ran into him years later at Malcolm McNabb's camp. I told him, I said, when I met you, you weren't very nice to me. And he said, I never said that stuff. I said, "Okay."
Tom was a character, and I mean, we're very fortunate. Mike Zonshine interviewed Tom before he passed away, and wonderful interview Mike did of Tom because obviously his experience and his recordings and whatnot. But he was a character.
Yeah.
So
he was.
What was it like studying with Jimmy?
It was great because I called him up, and he had a studio in Whittier. I didn't know L.A. very well, And here again, it was like, it's kind of handed to me. He had 2 studios. He had one in Whittier. I was living in Glendale, and he had one in Los Feliz. It was about 5 minutes from my house. And so I went, and he was super nice, And I was telling my students the other day, he said, "Let's take a walk." So he'd stop and he'd ask me a question. He was old. He was in his 80s then, He said, "Do you have anything against mouthpiece work?" And I was like, "No." And he goes, "Good." And we walk a little farther. He said, "Stop me." He said, "Do you have anything against pedal tones?" I said, "No." He goes, "Good, good." And we got back to his place, and he points at me, he said, "Next time you come, bring me a donut. I like donuts." And I said,
"I love it."
I said, "Okay." So he was super nice, really.
We got to know, what kind of donut did you bring him?
I don't
Was it
remember,
a maple?
but,
Was it a bar? Oh, come on.
I was careful to grab a donut,
But you did bring one.
Funny.
That's what matters.
I did.
Amazing.
I sure did.
So you start integrating his buzzing routine and the bending and things in your playing?
Yeah. Because I was pretty road weary. My child, like I said, I didn't know it, but my aperture was huge. And it helped. And I learned from Malcolm really later on that Jimmy's thing was center of the pitch to the center of the pitch. That was his whole thing, which is great. That's what I have my students. Malcolm put it, the most important note you're playing is the one you're leaving. That was Malcolm's way of putting it. And that's so true. I tell my students that all the time.
So you were in LA playing in the rehearsal bands, start developing your career.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. And then you joined another big band, right?
Yeah, I went with Harry James for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really love that. I did a record with him. I did that last record he ever did. I played on it. It was one of those direct disc records. And then I went with Buddy Rich because some of my pals, like Bob Collison and a couple of the guys were on Buddy's band, and somebody had left. So I went out with Buddy. I went out with Buddy twice.
Wow. All right. I have to, like, everyone has a Buddy story. And I know some of them can't be shared on the internet, but you have to have a Buddy story, right?
Yeah, he was actually really nice to me. He got mad at me a few times for a little. I was late. I missed the bus one time, and he just tore me up,
Yeah.
And I got on the bus, and he just let me know that he was the leader, and he didn't wait for me. I waited for he just. But then I said, "Sorry, B." We called him B, I said, "I'm really sorry." And and it cracked him up. He goes, "You Texas cats, man." And he said, "You're holding up the whole posse." He says, so, and then one time he came up to me before I was warming up, and I said, "Hey, B," and he walked by me, and then he came back and he started poking me in the chest, real hard. And he goes, "Yeah, you like playing on Joy Spring? You like soloing on that?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, last night you laid back on it. You'll never play it again if you lay back on it." He goes, "I don't lay back on my band. I'm not playing with you. You're playing with me." And I was like, "Okay." So that was, but
just like that.
Yeah.
Just don't lay back.
But he'd yell sometimes, but I thought, man, after this, no leader's going to scare me, But he was actually pretty nice to me. I don't have any horror stories.
But that's still pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the other story we've had Al Kaplan on. We've had some trombone players, certainly plenty of the trumpet players.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's certainly players that didn't like the band, and that was that. But if Buddy liked you or saw something in you,
that was it. And if he saw that he could get under your skin, he would do that too.
Yeah. Yeah.
He liked. He could be ornery. He could.
Yeah. And I mean, this day and age, it's at different times, but on the same token, it kind of gives you a thick skin that you need in this business,
Yeah.
You're tough crowds, tough critics. You put an album out, and LA Times pans it for whatever reason. You got to not let it get under your skin. And
that's true. That's so true.
So, yeah, kind of not necessarily the best way to develop a tough skin, but I suppose it does, right? Do you remember it was Bob Collison in the section when you were playing?
Yeah, he took Jay's place on Stan's band, and Jay went with Woody. That was kind of the pipeline there. Stan and Woody, Maynard, and then at the top of the list, really not on the list at all, was Basie. There were the ghost bands like Dorsey and Glenn Miller, and then there was Stan and Maynard and Woody. And then there was Ellington the band was out with Mercer, and then Basie was sort of they didn't hire kids, And so, Jay went with Woody, and then eventually Bob Collison came on Stan's band, from Ray Charles' band,
Or Ray Charles, yeah.
Yeah.
And Bob, another fabulous player that not on a lot of people's radars because he's based out of Australia. But,
right, he was great.
Yeah,
was
great
really
player.
Great.
And check out some of the videos of who's that? James Best in
right.
in Europe. Him and the Finley brothers and
he got to be real good friends with Chuck.
Yeah. So fabulous player.
I haven't seen Bob in a long time, but we got along.
Shout out to
Bob. He was great. So he got me on Buddy's band. And
He did that for a while, and then eventually settled in L.A. again after the road time. Why L.A. of all places?
I went back and was teaching some, and then I got a call from Dale Carley, who was one of the trumpet players on Basie's band. He was leaving, and he called me to come out with Basie, so I went out with Basie.
Oh, you did the Basie band for a while. Man.
Yeah.
Talk about legendary players. Yeah. I mean, was it a lot of the original members?
A few. Sonny Cohn was on still, and he was on with Snooky. Bob Summers was on there. He was on there for quite a while. Did you know? We called him Summertime, And then Byron Stripling was playing lead trumpet. So it was a really good section. That was a great section. Yeah, that was
a
really
great
fun.
section. With the different big bands you played with, I mean, I know it's all big band, but they're all distinct styles. How much preparation, or was it just like getting in there and feeling the music with the rest of the players, or was it something conscious you'd have to do?
I think there was only a couple of guys that actually, in the history of those bands, that played with Basie and Stan, because those were different styles, you know. But I think being around Jay Saunders in school, because Jay turned me on to Snooky Young early on. We'd heard Snooky with Thad and Mel, but he said, "Oh, you got to go back to Basie." And he basically said, "This is the greatest lead player of all time," and he was very influential. We can get to that later, but because I've been working for a long time on a book about Snooky. But I think being around Jay, it wasn't that much of a shift for me. Mm-hmm. Stan's band swung, but it was more, like I said, it was real heavy swing. It was very heavy. It was, like I said, Wagnerian. Whereas Basie, it was more the dancing, bouncing kind of swing, you know. But I seemed to fit in pretty well with that section. I was a pretty good section player, I think, because of Jay. Jay really helped me be a better section player. That's where a lot of my work came from, is that I was an okay section player, you know.
Yeah, well, take us into that. What makes you a good section player, you know?
Wow,
everyone knows the lead player has to work hard and play high, and the jazz player's got to be able to get around changes, but, you know, there's sometimes 2 or 3 other players sitting in the band, and what keeps them there?
Well, I learned a lot from being around people like Wayne and some of the LA guys, you know, some of the older lead players, Buddy Childers and people like that. Just kind of crawling inside and not playing louder than them, but playing up to them, playing in tune, really hooking up with them in tune and following what they do and paying attention to the cutoffs and matching their timbre and making them sound good, making the lead player sound good. So Jay really helped me with that. He said, you just got to crawl inside the bell and shadow the lead player. And I got to where I wasn't one of those guys that played perfectly all the time in sessions. But a few guys told me, you know, Rick Baptist told me and Wayne's told me that I'm pretty good, and I don't have definitive pitch or anything, but I'm pretty good at playing in tune with guys, which was really important. So that helped, you know.
Yeah, important stuff. And I suppose on the last note of the tune, not taking it up an octave and a half to play higher than the lead player.
That's
also doesn't hurt either, right?
Yeah.
So
I didn't have to worry about that. I never had those inclinations. Yeah.
So let's get in. So you were playing in LA because also, I mean, you were one of the charter founding members, so to speak, of the Clayton Hamilton Orchestra, right? That was when you were in LA. And was that the first time, because Snooky was on there, was that the first time you got to meet Snooky? Or
you know, actually, I met Snooky one time. I was on a plane. I was flying somewhere, and I was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I'll never forget this. It was when I lived in LA, and I saw in the front Doc Severinsen got on the plane and sat in first class. I went, wow, there's Doc Severinsen. And right behind him was this little, really dressed nicely, very nice, classy little man. And of all the places on the plane, he sat right in front of me.
No way.
And the plane was full, you know.
Wow.
And I thought, that has to be Snooky Young.
Yeah.
So I just leaned up and I said, are you Snooky Young? And he turned and I said, yeah. I was so nervous. And I said, do you know Thad Jones? And he goes, man, we were roommates, you know. So that was the very first time I met him.
Wow.
And then I played in a couple of rehearsal bands with him, and I was so nervous I didn't play very well. And then I was at the very first Clayton Hamilton rehearsal. By default, really, somebody had bailed on the rehearsal, but I was there from the very first day, and this is our 40th anniversary.
So a 40-year-long association because someone missed a rehearsal.
Right, that's right. That's right.
Or couldn't do a rehearsal, which is, you know, I mean, you know, the LA players and how they won't go on vacation or they won't go to certain things because you never know when the call's going to come.
It was such a blessing.
It's one of those examples where you were in the right spot at the right time.
I was so lucky.
Yeah.
I was so lucky because I sat next to Snooky for 26 years.
Talk about a schooling. I mean, just.
And it was funny because the trumpet section was Bobby Bryant, Snooky, and Oscar Brashear. And they literally didn't say much to me for 5 years. Very little.
Just you were the guy on the end.
I was a young, you know.
Yeah.
They weren't mean to me. They just didn't talk to me. You know.
Yeah.
So I just kind of bided my time. And then one time we were doing a record, and Sweets Edison was there. And he walked behind the trumpet section. We were up on a riser. And he said, hey, Snooky, hey, Bobby, hey, Oscar. And I reached around to shake hands with me, and he wouldn't shake hands with me. And he said, what's he doing here? And Bobby or Snooky, one of them turned around and he said, he's here because he belongs here. And I was shocked. I was like, wow, I didn't even know you knew who I was. You know? So they sort of accepted me after that.
I mean, I laugh, but man, what a story. That's, yeah. So that was it. So then the next day I was like, oh, how's it going? Just start small talk after that?
And then Snooky and I became, I was a pallbearer when he passed. We got to be really good friends. And I brought him to Eastman 3 times. I took him to about a dozen schools, and we gave workshops, and I gave a little history, and he took questions, and we played a little bit. It was super fun. Yeah.
Wow.
It was great.
What was it like sitting next to him? Did you guys talk trumpet, or
Yeah.
did you just learn from listening to him play, or
That
phrase?
too. That too.
Yeah.
I mean, he was such a force, He wouldn't say much to you about playing, but he was really nice. He was super nice. He just swung so hard, and his sound, you could just get inside his sound. And he was so connected with the drummer, Jeff Hamilton. I mean, of course, if you can't hook up with Jeff Hamilton, something's wrong with you. But
Yeah.
but it was so obvious how connected he was with the drummer, And Jay Saunders had told me, sitting next to him was like, wow. And then Bobby had a stroke, Bobby Bryant, and we got somebody else, and it was Ray Brown. I don't know if you know that name, Ray Brown.
Yeah.
Trumpet player.
Yeah.
Played with Earth, Wind, and Fire. Great player. He took Bobby's place. And then Snooky wanted him to play lead. So he played lead, and he sounded great. But he'd always say, well, Snooky, how do you want to do this? He'd always ask Snooky. And then Bobby wanted to come back after his stroke. So John added another book. That's when we started with 5 trumpets.
Moved to 5.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, I mean, what would you talk to Snooky about, like trumpet-wise? Did he ever? Where did he come from? Do you know who his teachers were? Or
he really didn't have a teacher. He had one teacher when he was really young. He was totally self-taught. But he'd at Lunsford, and he went on the band. I could go on about it because I've really done a lot of But he went out with Basie to sub for Buck Clayton at one point. But that was a solo chair, and he always thought of himself as not a soloist. And then he went out and started playing lead, and it took him a while to get it because it was totally a different feel than Lunsford.
Yeah.
It's totally a different feel than everything. They really set the bar. Gerald Wilson said that Basie's band set the style for the bop guys, which is so true. That's mind-boggling, but that's true.
That's where it all sets up. Well, maybe we should do a Snooky Young episode because, again, you'd mentioned earlier, so you're working on a book.
I am.
Did you do interviews or did you just
research? I did 100 interviews.
Wow.
I interviewed everybody. I interviewed all the guys that were left from Thad's band, which weren't very many. Randy Brecker, Eddie Daniels. There weren't very many guys left from the band when Snooky was on the band. Very few guys from Basie's band, probably nobody. Several guys from the Tonight Show band, but there weren't very many guys left from that either.
Yeah.
And all the guys in L.A., Chuck, everybody's so great. And some guys that hardly ever, like Faddis, John never talked to me, but when he talked about Snooky, he was very kind. Oh, yeah. And all the New York guys that knew him, 100 people. So I've been working on it for 13 years. And I'm not an author, I always say, Nathaniel Hawthorne, I'm not, I'm a pretty good writer, but my younger son just got a degree in film writing, and he's been helping me write, and he's just doing a great job. He's really helping me get the narrative together, because I had some people read it, and they said, there's a woman who wrote a book on Gil Evans. Stephanie Crease is her name. She's written a couple of really good books. And she said, you need some help on this. She said, so my son's been helping me. It's been great. So we're trying to get it out. So that would be a great episode because there's too much to do here,
I was going to say, so no pressure, but
anytime.
if the book is getting close to being done, it would be nice to do kind of a tribute episode about Snooky.
Anytime.
Well, let's talk about that because I'd love to see the book. And
it was really fun because my librarian here at Eastman, great guy, trumpet player, he found some microfilm stuff of some old black newspapers. And do you know who took Snooky's place on Benny Carter's band?
No.
Euan Racy.
No, really?
And Euan Racy was roommates with Fats Navarro.
Oh, my gosh. I had no idea.
Isn't that wild? There was an article in one of these papers about it. Benny Carter breaks the race line, hires a new trumpet player, Euan Racy. I was like, what? I knew he'd played with Benny Carter because I studied with Euan.
While you were out here as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, another gentle giant, you know?
Man, no kidding.
Jeez. So you Clayton Hamilton for years, you did your own stuff as well. You had your own groups, did your own recordings?
Yeah. I actually had a record label with Joe LaBarbera and Tom Warrington and Larry Kuntz. It was called Jazz Compass. But we kind of folded it up because it was costing us money, but we had.
I was going to say, not to be facetious, but there's not a lot of money in a jazz record label.
Yeah, but we had a great time, and we did a bunch of really good records.
Yeah, but on the same token, I mean, it's a labor of love, but
it was.
What's the difference for you being a sideman on someone's big band or someone else's project and then putting your own stuff out?
Yeah, it was a learning process. I mean, my very first one I did for another label, and I felt like I needed a producer, so Vince Mendoza produced it for me, which was great. And I got it was all really great players. And then the next one I did was for a Japanese label, and it was just great. Bob Shepard and Steve Houghton, and just really great players. Tom Warrington, Bob Bowman, really great players. And, they haven't made a lot of noise, but I feel like they've held up. They're pretty good records. I learned a lot. And some of them were with my tunes, and some of my tunes were okay, and some of them weren't very good. But it's kind of the way you mark the time where you are, My first record, do you know who Tony Plogue is?
Oh, of course. Of course. He was on here about a year ago. Yeah, he was on. Did an episode.
Wow.
Yeah. And he has his own podcast. Shout out to Tony. So, yeah.
Tony Plogue. Well, I used to hear him when I first moved to L.A. He was playing a lot, and I had some of his records, and he just knocked me out, right? So one time, I just gotten with Yamaha. I'm not with them anymore, but I was performing artist, right? And somebody told me Tony gotten all his horns stolen out of his trunk, all of them. His pick, his C, his B-flat. And so he said he didn't have any horns. So I said, I've got a Bach C and a Bach B-flat I'm not using. Why don't you just take it to him? So he did. And then my Yamaha rep at the time, he called me up and he said, we're looking for a good classical player as an artist. And I said, man, Tony Plogue's my favorite classical player here. So about a week later, I get a phone call, and it's Tony Plogue, and he said, do I know you? And I said, no, you don't know me. And he said, well, you just loaned me 2 nice horns. He said, my manager's trying to get me with Yamaha for 7 years, and all of a sudden they tell me you got me with Yamaha. And I said, yeah, well, he said, let's have lunch. So we had lunch, and I was a huge fan of his. And he said, what can I do for you? I said, just give me some advice or something. He said, do a record. Mark where you are now. So that was really why I did my first record. And a funny thing, he's been here a few times. He was here with Jim Thompson one day, and I didn't know it. So Jim called me up. He said, come over for dinner. So I walked in, and Tony Plogue's standing there, and he goes, do I know you? It was great. He's a great guy.
You're a super nice guy, amazing player, amazing writer.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
He still plays good, and he doesn't even practice, I don't think.
Yeah.
He still plays great. Yeah.
Super sweet guy, too. Just one of those guys that makes you upset, right? It's like,
Super
come on.
nice guy.
What a great story, too. And I love that idea of like marking where you are, because that's the thing when I'm trying to wrap my head, especially around like a jazz album, because as a jazz player, you're always creating. Obviously, that's the nature of the art form.
Yeah.
So then to put something down in a recorded form, I mean, not to age you, but I'm assuming when you were doing your first albums, they were out to tape, right? Not fancy digital stuff, right?
Yeah, you're right.
So
digital 2-track is what it was called. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But so you had less leeway in terms of, putting solos down and. I don't quite like that phrase. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, right? You kind of go.
If you edited it, it was with white gloves and a razor blade.
Yeah.
And
so then, as a jazz artist, how did things change going into the digital format?
Well, you were more isolated in the studios and stuff. You could overdub, but I've never been one to overdub very much. I got called overdub solos for other projects, but on my records, we pretty much did them live. And even now, when I play with Dave Sloniker's band with Wayne, and some of the guys like to overdub their solos. I'm not very good at that, so I just play it with the band.
Play what you feel, put it down.
Yeah, and say a prayer that I don't blow a good take with a bad solo.
I love it.
So,
any projects you're working on right now? Any recordings or books or anything other than the Snooky Young book, obviously?
Yeah, well, Sloniker's going to record coming up pretty soon. And I did a thing a few years ago it didn't come out as a record, but Gene Bertoncini, great guitar player, he had an influence on John Clayton Jeff Hamilton, Joe LaBarbera, and Larry Kuntz. And so it was kind of a miracle, but he was in L.A. and I got everybody together for 2 days.
Wow.
And yeah, it was pretty special. And we recorded a bunch of tunes. It's on YouTube. It's called Hope Beat. That's the name
Hope
of it.
Beat. Okay. Yeah, we'll find it and we'll put links to it.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
Send folks to that.
And some of it's just with 2 guitars and trumpet. Some of it, the second day, Clayton couldn't be there, so I had Joe LaBarbera and Jeff Hamilton in the same studio playing together. That was pretty cool.
Man.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Well, we'll definitely put links so folks can check that out.
Yeah, it's pretty
and
cool.
then I also want to talk, you spend some time before we wrap up here, obviously, because we're doing this interview. You're live from the Eastman School of Music,
I'm here at
where you've
Eastman,
been since, 2000?
2000 is my 25th year, yeah.
Wow. We've had a number of trumpet professors on that are doing the classical thing, and they talk about the audition process as far as playing your excerpts or playing the Haydn and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I'd love to get your take on audition advice for someone coming in as a jazz major. And if you want to split it up also, because you guys do graduate programs there as well, right? So, what are you listening for with an undergrad coming in versus a graduate student audition? Any advice you can shed on that?
Well, as in any audition, to be over-prepared. Mm-hmm. Like if I see a young man walk in and he's reading a lead sheet, that's probably not a good sign, So stuff should be memorized for sure. I always tell the guys, I don't care what they play, I care how they play. So if they want to play a much simpler tune, that's fine with me. I'd rather them play a much simpler tune and make it feel good. They're not going to impress me with a hard tune if they don't sound good. So, yeah. And then I'm listening for time, feel, sound, tone. Jim Thompson always called it tone. I think that's probably a better word than sound, But, yeah, I watch for technique, too. It doesn't have to be perfect for us. And I'm kind of coming out of a classical study, pedagogy, really. So I think that's important to be good trumpet players. If they're not, we work on it, But I just think being over-prepared and be really prepared, but respectful, dress good, dress well, being respectful to the rhythm section, and just knowing that if you're just doing 3 tunes, just really know them,
Yeah. And what about stylistically? I mean, obviously, you'd want to do some variation in styles, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, any advice in terms of how to choose a good mix of tunes, or you could do from different eras to show versatility?
They could do that if they want. I don't usually require that. We study early styles here. I'm a huge fan of Louis Armstrong. I don't require my guys to play like Louis Armstrong, but I wanted them to have him in their playing.
Okay.
And I always tell them, and the classical guys, there's going to be some day where somebody says on a recording session or you might be in a pops orchestra or something, somebody's going to say, could you make this sound like Louis Armstrong? And so you're going to need to know, okay, quarter notes, the shakes, spelling the chords. You're going to need to know some nuances that he did. So we definitely study him a lot. But in terms of auditions, no. So the main thing I would say about that is to study the feel and make sure if you're playing a bop tune, you're not putting all the accents on the beat. It's got to be a offbeat, like Snooky.
Yeah.
See, Snooky was interesting. We'll talk about that more. But Snooky, when he played lead, it was like a bop player. And when he played solos, it was more like Sweet Edison. It was more downbeat. Buck Clayton. Yeah.
Yeah. And what if they play Joy Spring? Can they lay back?
No.
You're going to go up in the audition and poke them in the chest?
If you want to study with me, no. Yeah.
And would the same be true for like a graduate audition? You're just expecting a higher level of playing at that, same advice?
Pretty much, right. We've succeeded. I mean, after all these years, we try to make the auditions pretty comfortable for everybody. We invite the parents for a meeting, and we have a little jam session at the end and open up for questions. And it's pretty selective. We have probably 120 people audition for the jazz department, and we only take about 18 per year. It's not a huge jazz department. So it's pretty selective, but I'm a little more lenient than some people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then also, it sounds more like a family kind of thing. It's a
It is.
fit of culture as well as you have to play well, obviously.
That's very true. It is.
Yeah.
It is sort of like a family here. It's a real warm environment, except for the weather.
Yeah, except for winters.
One of my colleagues that I love just walked by.
I'd like to spend time, because you said you're a practicer. Do you have a regular routine that you still stick to, or do you just kind of mix it up depending on what your daily playing activities are?
I had so many good teachers that I should be really good. And I can't say that I am, but because I studied with Boyd Hood, when I was in school. I got my master's at USC late in my 40s, but I studied with Boyd. He was great. I studied with Yuan. I studied with Jimmy Stamp. And I think it makes you a better teacher if you've experienced some problems, but I still really work on it, and I'm always trying new things. And Jim Thompson helped me. We have a new trumpet professor here. His name's Andrew McCandless. He was the principal in the Toronto Symphony. And he can play the trumpet. He is beautiful and a really nice guy. He doesn't know it yet, but I'm going to get a lesson from him as well. And Snooky was like a teacher to me. And Snooky did Schlossberg 2 hours a day. Wow. And we'd practice together, and he would wear me out. He was 90.
2 hours of Schlossberg. It sounds like the Indiana guys, like the William
I know,
Adams,
right? It does.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah, he had about 8 pages of the Schlossberg book laminated, and it was in his trumpet case, and he'd pull it out. And when he was here, he came to my house several times, and I'd be like, whew. And he'd say, what? You tired or what? He told me one time, he said, you know why I practiced so much when I was young? And I said, no. He said, because I was scared. He said, I was scared I wouldn't play well because I had to provide for my family, But his chops, he was so consistent. Oh, my gosh. So I try to, but with being a jazz player, I've got other things I need to work on besides my chops. And my students, too. I try to get them to where they're practicing creatively, like fold some Schlossberg into some other things like chord spellings and scales and things like that, As a matter of fact, do you know who Burnett Dillon is?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Well, Burnett and I are kind of working on a book together because he's a classical and such a beautiful player.
Yeah, yeah.
He put it to me several years ago. He said, we should do a book together. And I said, yeah, just what we need, another trumpet book,
Yeah, but I would love to see that.
But we are working on it. Yeah.
Okay.
He was in L.A. during Christmas, and he stayed in Burbank, and I went and saw him, and I'm going to go up and see him. He lives in Eugene now.
Yeah, he's up in Oregon. He came into the shop.
Oh, yeah?
Maybe it was before the pandemic. Him and Jim Atkinson, the horn player, good buddies, and they came up, spend the day.
Oh, we're good friends,
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're working on it.
Keep me in the loop.
I will, John. And actually, I want to come up to the shop. When I was with Stan, when I was at school, and all through Stan's band, I played one of Bob's mouthpieces.
Really?
Yeah.
I never knew that.
Yeah.
I gotta go dig in the files. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to know exactly what it is. I don't even know what it is.
Well, I'll figure it out. I'll go look when we're done here.
I'd love to talk to you, so I got to come up and see you.
Yeah, well, we'll work on that.
Okay.
And speaking of equipment, what are you using now? Let's talk about horns and.
I've been using the same equipment for a long time. I did play a horn. It's called a New French Besson. I don't know if you remember those. Mm-hmm. That was Marvin Stamm's horn for a while. And it was made by Zig.
Yeah.
And it was sort of the same horn that Wayne played on. Mm-hmm. Except he pulled his slide out about that far. It was different, but it looked similar. But it was a really nice horn. I still have it. And now, for the last 25 years, I've been playing an Edwards.
Yeah, that's right.
And they don't even make those horns anymore. But it's really a nice horn, and I'm kind of looking for something else to take. But I haven't found anything that comes even close. It's got it's a little heavier, and it's raw brass, and it's kind of a large, medium large. It's like a 462 or something like that. Mm-hmm. It's got that lead pipe. Do you know about those horns? Yeah, the lead pipe went inside.
We've had a few of them come through here. Through the years.
It's just it's really a good horn. It's heavier brass. And then I play a Bach 3B. I've tried a bunch of other horns. I don't know how many horns I've tried, but nothing really stands up. I wouldn't mind trying a Canstel again, but I like heavier and kind of darker horns,
Yeah, that's your voice.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, and the 3B, that'll do it.
Yeah, it seems, sometimes it feels huge,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Flugelhorn? Do you play flugelhorn much?
I don't much, unless every once in a while, like Snooky got to where he didn't like flugelhorn in Clayton's band, so we quit using them in Clayton's band. We just used buckets, And then
the ultimate trumpet protest.
it was, right?
just stop using them. Maybe they won't notice.
But then if we did a record, sometimes John would say, maybe we need some flugelhorns, so we get a double and stuff, But I have an beautiful old Queen on. It's great. Mm-hmm. I love it. It's great, but I just don't play it. I don't play flugelhorn much.
Rather play the B flat.
Yeah.
Man, well, absolutely great having you on here, Clay.
Oh, it's been my pleasure.
How can folks find out about you? Do you have a website or?
We're building a new one, so
okay.
I'm not sure. I'll let you know.
Okay.
We needed to revamp it. It was clayjenkinsmusic.com. That was it. Okay. Clay Jenkins Music, but I'm pretty sure they took it down. So
okay. Well,
I'll have another one.
If folks are listening to this in the future, if the website's up, that's where they can go, and if not, they can use Google and find you. Well, we try to make it as easy as possible.
Oh, it was great. Thank you. God. I'm so glad you got with Emil.
Yeah.
I emailed him after I talked to you, and we're going to hook up next time I'm out there.
Great. Yeah. What an amazing player. What a special soul he is.
I'm so glad to hear you say that.
Oh, yeah. So, tons of great stories. So, we'll have to do this again. We'll chat. We'll do one about Snooky or what else. I'm sure there's a million other things we can talk about.
I hope to be done with that in the next 6 months, I hope.
Keep us in the loop.
I will.
Before we wrap up, I have one last question for you, Clay. If you could leave our listeners with your best piece of advice, and this could be about anything, it doesn't have to necessarily be about trumpet or jazz or anything, what would that be?
Well, something Snooky said to me. One time a little guy came up to him and he asked him the same question, do you have advice? And Snooky didn't hear very well, so he looked at me and I said, he wants to know if you have some advice. And Snooky said, I'm not a good teacher. And I said, sure you are, So he looked down at the little guy and he said, practice every day and be nice to people. That was Snooky's advice, right? So I looked at the little guy and said, that's a $1,000 lesson right there, So I would say just you can be a great musician, but it's really how you make people feel that's important.
Well, thank you. That's an honor. Absolutely honor, Clay. Stay warm over there. And I look forward to seeing you next time you're out in L.A. Come out and hear you play.
I'll be in touch. I'll be in touch. Thank you.
Clay Jenkins, thank you so much. Clay, thank you from the bottom of my heart for joining me on the podcast. If not totally evident from the first few words, Clay is the most warm, down-to-earth, humble person. I've literally just met him through the screen when we started this interview, and he's one of those kinds of people that just makes you feel right at home with both yourself and with him. And even without the context of Emil's interview last episode and getting that background of what kind of true person Clay is, I want to give him a hug. There needs to be more people in the world like Clay Jenkins. And that's not even talking about his amazing playing. We didn't really talk about it, but we were introduced. Preston, our audio engineer, he's a horn player, and he was playing a concert. It was a Miles Davis concert, and the artist that was supposed to play had to cancel for an illness or something right at the last minute, and Clay came in literally on a few days' notice and knocked it out of the park, playing all of Miles's parts. So if you weren't there, you couldn't hear it, and that's why I didn't really bring it up in the interview. But I can't really overstate how great of a player Clay is. And he's, as he mentioned, he's a practicer. He's a lifelong practicer. He's always trying to improve, and it's really inspiring to hear someone at his level still talking about what they go through every day trying to better themselves. And now, since 2000, passing that inspiration on to his students at Eastman. So thank you, Clay. If you want more information, we'll have all the links to find out more about Clay and about the Eastman School of Music down in the description and on the show notes for this episode. And I'd be remiss if I didn't remind you to please leave us that 5-star review. Hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening to this podcast. It keeps us going for another 10 or 12 years, however long we've been doing this. I've lost count. But really, I say it every time, but it really does mean a lot. I have players that come up that have just found out about the podcast, and they're going back through 130 some odd episodes. That's a lot of binge listening and a lot of trumpet talk. Coming up next, I have another fun guest, Lee Loughnane, the founding member of the band Chicago. As he said, the band that's so good that they named a city after them. I just saw Lee perform back in September, and the band is still crushing it 58 years later. We talked for almost an hour and a half, a wonderful conversation about trumpet playing, about his life, and of course some of the things about the band. So tune in for next episode, should be up in a couple weeks. Thank you for listening. Until next time, let's go out and make some music.